Welcome to Spectral Shadows. This is the place where the stories don't just haunt your mind, they follow you into the dark. Before the whispers begin, tell me, where are you watching from and what time is it? Midnight? Or closer to the hour when shadows move on their own? If you're brave enough to continue, prove it. Like this video, subscribe to Spectral Shadows, and leave a comment with your time and location, so we'll know exactly where to find you. Now, let's open the door to tonight's nightmare. Story number 1. The world is a different place at 3 a.m. It's quiet. The city holds its breath, and the only sounds are the hum of your own engine and the lonely sigh of a distant train. I know this world better than I know the world of the sun. For the last 2 years, it's been my office. I'm a rideshare driver, and I work the dead hours from midnight to 6 a.m., the hours when the city sleeps and the weirdness comes out to play. Mostly, it's a grind. A few airport runs for red-eye flights, a couple of tired nurses or factory workers getting off a late shift. The money is barely enough to cover my rent and the ever-increasing cost of just existing. It's a life of constant financial anxiety, of checking your bank balance and feeling that familiar cold knot in your stomach. But it's a job, and a few months ago, the app I drive for offered me an upgrade, an invitation to their VIP Navigator program. The email was full of the usual corporate buzzwords: enhanced earning opportunities, exclusive clientele, premium service tier. It promised a way out of the grind. All I had to do was maintain a high rating and opt in. I clicked the link. It took me to a long, dense page of terms and conditions, a wall of text in a tiny font. I did what everyone does. I scrolled to the bottom, ticked the little box, and clicked "I agree," without reading a single word. I just wanted more money. I had no idea what I was actually agreeing to. For a couple of weeks, nothing changed. I was starting to think it was just another empty corporate promise. Then, the first VIP request came through. It was 2:15 a.m. on a Tuesday. The request pinged with a different, softer chime. The pickup was a standard downtown hotel. The destination was an address on the far outskirts of town. A street name I'd never even seen before. The fare estimate was significant, more than I usually make in half a night. I accepted instantly, a jolt of excitement cutting through my usual late-night fatigue. A man in a crisp, dark suit was waiting under the hotel awning. He looked completely normal, if a little tired, like a businessman who'd just gotten off a long flight. He got into the back seat, gave me a polite, curt nod, and said nothing. I confirmed the destination. He grunted in affirmation, and we were off. I followed the app's GPS, my car a silent little bubble, moving through the empty, sleeping city. Halfway there, as we were cruising down the main highway that leads out of the city, the app chimed. New route suggested. 10 minutes faster. This was normal. The app often rerouted for traffic or accidents, though there was zero traffic at this hour. The new route directed me off the highway and onto a series of dark, winding back roads. I glanced in the rearview mirror. The passenger was just sitting there, a silhouette in the back seat, staring out the window. But something felt different. about him. The shadows in the back of the car seemed deeper around him, darker, as if he were absorbing the faint light from the dashboard. And for a split second, as we passed under a lone street light, I could have sworn his eyes flashed. Brief, faint glint of something that wasn't a reflection. I blinked, and it was gone. Just a tired man in a suit. I told myself I was just tired, too. Trust the tech, I thought. The roads became more and more desolate. The houses gave way to fields, the fields to dense, black woods. The streetlights disappeared completely. My headlights cut a lonely tunnel through an oppressive, absolute darkness. Finally, the pleasant robotic voice of the GPS announced, "You have arrived." I stopped the car. We were in the middle of a dark, empty field. There was no house, no driveway, no landmark of any kind. Just tall grass swaying in the night wind and the endless, silent trees. A cold knot of unease tightened in my stomach. Sir?" I said, turning in my seat. "This is the spot. There's but nothing here." He turned his head slowly. He was smiling. It was a calm, placid, empty smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Thank you," he said, his voice smooth and even. "This is perfect." He got out of the car, closed the door gently, and without another word, he walked off into the darkness, disappearing into the tall grass, as if the field had swallowed him whole. I watched until I couldn't see him anymore. I sat there for a full minute, my heart pounding, before the app pinged again. Ride complete. The payment came through. The fare was exactly what was estimated, and then another notification. Your passenger has added a tip. A massive one. A tip that was 3 times the cost of the fare itself. I drove home that night with a sense of profound, chilling strangeness, but also with a wallet that was substantially fatter. I told myself it was just a weirdo, a guy, meeting someone for a shady deal, or just a rich eccentric who liked being dropped off in fields. The money made it easy to rationalize. It made the weirdness a feature, not a bug. But then it kept happening. The rides became a strange, terrifying, and incredibly lucrative new routine. A week later, I got a ping from the Old Wharf district. The pickup was at the end of a long, foggy pier. The air tasted of salt and decay, and the only sound was the black water lapping against the rotting pylons below. A woman was waiting, a lone figure at the end of the pier. She was beautiful, dressed in a long, dark coat. But as she approached the car, she moved with a strange, fluid grace. Almost like she didn't have a skeleton. She flowed into the back seat. The reroute came almost immediately, taking us away from the city and towards an industrial wasteland of abandoned canneries and rusting warehouses. I glanced in the rearview mirror as she shifted in her seat. For a split second, under the dim interior light, her skin seemed to ripple. It wasn't a trick of the light. It was like watching a badly rendered special effect, a digital texture struggling to stay mapped onto an object. I snapped my eyes back to the road, my hands gripping the steering wheel. The drop-off was in front of a massive, derelict factory, its windows like 1,000 empty, black eyes. She got out with that same watery grace and vanished into the shadows of the building. The tip was, once again, obscene. A few nights after that, I was sent to a quiet, dead-end street in a wealthy suburb. The houses were all dark. A young man was waiting under a streetlight. He seemed agitated, constantly fidgeting. He got into the car with an awkward haste, and I immediately noticed a long, thick lump under the back of his coat, right at the base of his spine. My first thought was a weapon, but the shape was wrong. It was too long, too flexible. As he settled into the seat, it moved, a distinct serpentine twitch. It was a tail. He felt me see it, I think. He froze, then tried to adjust his coat with a pained, embarrassed expression. The entire ride, he sat rigid, his shame and my terror creating a thick, unbearable silence in the car. The app took us to the dead center of a massive, old bridge that spanned a dry, rocky riverbed. He got out, gave me a look that was a strange mix of a warning and a shared, cursed secret, and then walked to the railing and just stood there, looking down. I didn't stay to watch. The weirdest was the young girl. The pickup was at a university library just after midnight. She couldn't have been more than 19. She got into the back and didn't say a single word. She just sat there, smiling at me in the rearview mirror. It was a wide, constant, unblinking smile. As we passed under a streetlight, the light flashed across her face, and I saw her teeth. They weren't fangs, not like a vampire in a movie, but every single tooth, from incisor to molar, was honed to a perfect, carnivorous point, like a mouthful of tiny white daggers. She knew I'd seen them. Her smile widened, a silent, gleeful threat. The app led us to the gates of an old, long-abandoned asylum on a hill overlooking the city. She got out and just stood by the gate as I drove away, her smile the last thing I saw in my mirror. I was making incredible money, more than I had ever dreamed of. I was paying my bills, saving, and finally getting ahead. But the unease was growing into a constant, low-grade terror. I was a ferryman, a chauffeur for something else, and the car wasn't entirely mine anymore. I found that out the hard way. One night, I had another silent man in the back, the kind whose presence felt like a block of ice. The app tried to reroute me down a dark, unpaved service road into the woods. I'd had enough. My nerves were shot. I ignored it. I stayed on the brightly lit main road. The car's electronics began to fail. The radio, which had been off, burst to life with a deafening shriek of pure, white static. The headlights flickered, then died completely, plunging us into absolute darkness on the highway. The engine began to sputter, to cough, the car lurching and slowing. I pumped the gas pedal, but it was useless. The car was dying. From the back seat, a low, calm voice spoke for the first time. I really wouldn't do that if I were you. I looked in the rearview mirror. The man was leaning forward, his face obscured by the total darkness. The chosen road is always the safest path, he said, his voice a smooth, cold whisper. Straying from it can lead to unexpected destinations, unpleasant ones for both of us. A cold sweat broke out on my skin. I wrenched the steering wheel, turning the dying car back towards the turnoff for the service road. The moment my tires hit the dirt, the engine roared back to life. The headlights snapped on at full brightness. The static from the radio cut out. The car was fine. I was no longer in control. I made the turn. I completed the ride. I took the money. But something inside me had broken. I had to know. I couldn't live with the not knowing anymore. Last week, I got a request. A young woman picked up from a downtown bar. The ride was the usual routine. The reroute, the silent journey, the drop-off at an abandoned graffiti-covered factory, the huge tip. But this time, I had a plan. I had her name from the app. When I got home, my hands shaking, I typed her name into a social media search bar. Her profile popped up immediately. It was her. Same smiling face, same haircut. Her profile was public. I scrolled through her photos. There she was, in a picture posted just an hour before I had picked her up. She was at the bar, laughing with friends, a drink in her hand. The caption read, "Girls' Night, so good to be out." I felt a moment of relief. She was a normal person, a real person. Maybe this was all just some elaborate, weird urban exploration game for rich eccentrics. Then I scrolled further down, her profile, and my world fell out from under me. The post directly below the picture from the bar was from her sister. It was dated the next day, but the year was 5 years ago. It was a memorial post, a collage of her smiling pictures with a long, heartbreaking caption. "Can't believe it's been 5 years since we lost you. I still think about you every day. That night, after you left the bar, I wish you had just taken a cab home. I wish that drunk driver hadn't run that red light. We miss you so much." I stared at the screen, at the smiling face of the woman I had just dropped off at an abandoned factory, and at the memorial post mourning her death in a car accident 5 years ago. My mind shattered. The pieces clicked into a place I had refused to let them go. If she were dead, what about the others? The woman with the rippling skin, the man with the tail, the girl with the sharp teeth. Were they ghosts too? Or were they something else entirely? Things from a place even darker than the grave, using my car, my app, as their own private taxi service between worlds. The money. It suddenly felt filthy, tainted. It was the price of my silence, my complicity. I had to get rid of it. I had to sever my connection to this whole thing. The next morning, I went to my bank. I walked up to the ATM, my heart pounding. I was going to withdraw every single cent I had earned from these rides and donate it to a charity. Just get it away from me. I put my card in, entered my PIN, and selected check balance. I stared at the screen. My checking account, my savings account. They were both nearly empty. The same meager balance I'd had 3 months ago, before the VIP program had started. This was wrong. There should have been tens of thousands of dollars in there. I took my card and went inside to a human teller. I explained the situation. She typed my details into her computer, a confused frown on her face. "Sir," she said, turning the monitor towards me, "there are no large deposits in your account. The transaction history is just your regular paycheck and your usual small rideshare payouts. There's no record of these tips you're talking about." I rushed home, my mind a screaming wreck. I pulled up the driver app on my phone. I went to my earnings history. It was all gone. Weeks and weeks of VIP rides, of massive fares and obscene tips. They had been wiped clean. The app showed no record of them ever happening. It was as if I had imagined the whole thing, but I knew I hadn't. I knew what I had done. I had broken the rules. I had looked behind the curtain. I had read the terms and conditions the hard way. Don't ask questions. Don't get curious. Just drive. My payment wasn't money. My payment was my ignorance. And the moment I gave that up, they took the money back. The VIP rides stopped after that, completely. The app went back to normal, feeding me the occasional low-paying airport run. The silence in my car at night was no longer peaceful. It was heavy, expectant. I was back to being broke, but now I was broke and haunted. Yesterday I came home from a long, unprofitable night of driving, and I found an envelope had been slipped under my apartment door. There was no stamp, no address, just a single folded piece of high-quality, cream-colored paper. I opened it. The text was printed in a crisp, clean, corporate font, a notice of service. Tire reassignment, dear navigator. It has come to our attention that your activity has been in violation of the terms agreed upon in the VIP Navigator User Agreement, Section 7, Subsection C. Discretion and non-disclosure. All accrued premium incentives have been forfeited as per the contract. Your account has been returned to the standard service tier, effective immediately. We thank you for your service. That was it. A corporate memo from hell. A pink slip from the underworld. I don't know what to do. I'm trapped. I'm back in my old desperate life. But now I know what the silence of the city at night really holds. I know what kind of passengers are waiting on those dark street corners. And I know there's a secret, hidden transit system moving all around us, operating on rules I can't begin to comprehend. I broke my contract. They took my money. But I can't shake the feeling that they didn't take everything they were owed. I feel like I'm still on their books, and I'm terrified that one day I'm going to get a ride request, not as a driver, but as a passenger, and the drop-off will be somewhere dark and desolate and final. Story number 2. I've always believed certain places absorb energy, not just haunted castles or graveyards, but places where a lot of people pass through. Airports, train stations, hotels, especially hotel rooms. See, I used to work night security at one of the poshest hotels in Dublin City. 5 stars, marble floors, high-end clientele, that kind of place. You'd think nothing dark could touch it. But let me tell you, money doesn't stop the weird shit from creeping in. It started around 2:17 a.m. I remember because I was mid-yawn, flipping through the camera feeds, when the front desk patched a call through to security. A man's voice. Panicked, breathless. My wife's in the bath. I think she's not breathing. I snapped, upright. Me and this other guard, Mark, rushed to room 237 on the 8th floor. The hallway was dead quiet, the kind of quiet that feels wrong, like the building itself is holding its breath. We pushed in. The guy was pacing around, soaked from the waist down. The bathroom door was wide open. I'll never unsee that moment. She was in the tub, completely still. Water up to her shoulders, eyes open, but not seeing. We dragged her out, tried CPR. I was counting compressions under my breath while Mark gave breaths. Her skin was cold, like not just chilly, cold, like touching stone. I knew it was too late, but we had to try. Police arrived within minutes. The moment they stepped in, they told us to stop. One of the officers pulled me aside and said quietly, "She's been gone a while, a couple of hours at least." The husband told them they'd argued earlier. He stormed out, came back, saw her in the bath, assumed she was just soaking, and went to bed. Said he only got suspicious when she didn't join him. No obvious signs of violence, no water overflow, no witnesses. They couldn't charge him. But between us, staff, cops, even the paramedics, we all felt it. That gut pull, that something's off feeling. He checked out the next morning, quiet, calm, not a single tear. Room 237 was locked off for 3 weeks. Housekeeping deep cleaned every inch. Management said, accidents happen, life moves on. They reopened the room like nothing happened. No priest, no sage, nothing. Just fresh linens and a new bar of soap. The first person to stay in that room after the death was this woman named Liz. She was a regular corporate client, stayed at least once a month. She always asked for a high-floor room. She got 237 without knowing a damn thing. Next morning, 6:50 a.m., she's at the front desk with her suitcase, and she looks like she'd seen hell. I was walking past when she said, loud enough for guests to hear, "That room is haunted. I didn't sleep a second. Something's wrong with it." She said she kept hearing dripping water all night. Not just from the bathroom, like it was coming from the walls. At 3 a.m., the taps in the bathtub turned on by themselves. Full blast. She walked in and turned them off, soaking her slippers. Then 5 minutes later, the shower started. She swore she hadn't touched anything. She said she kept smelling something. Floral, like old roses, but rotten, like death wearing perfume. We offered her another room. She refused. Said she was checking out for good. Never came back. After that, room 237 got a reputation. Internally, guests kept requesting room changes after one night. Some didn't even last that long. There was this German businessman who called at 1:03 a.m., whispering like he didn't want someone to hear. "I think someone is in my bathroom." I asked if he saw anything. "No," he said, "but someone is coughing, a wet cough." I went up. The bathroom was empty, but the floor was damp. Towels crumpled in the corner. The toilet had been used. Seat up, water moving like it had just flushed. The guy hadn't gone in all night. He checked out the next morning without breakfast. A honeymoon couple stayed there once. The woman came, down at 4:12 a.m. in her pajamas, crying. She said she saw a pale woman standing at the foot of the bed, dripping wet, not moving, just staring. Her husband didn't see anything, but he confirmed the room temperature dropped 10 degrees in minutes. I checked the thermostat. It was set to 23 degrees Celsius. The room was at 14. No windows were open. I started dreading. That room, even walking past it, gave me this tightness in my chest. Like I was being watched. I'd make rounds and literally speed walk past it. Once I was reviewing CCTV around 2:20 a.m., same time the original call had come in, and I saw something weird. The hallway camera outside 237 glitched, just for a second. But when I paused the footage and zoomed in, there was a shadow. Not a person, a shape, just outside the door, like someone was standing there, pressed against it. I replayed it 100 times. Mark saw it, too. It's probably a compression error, he said, but his voice shook when he said it. Management refused to shut the room. They said we'd get sued if we told guests. Unless you see something tangible, it's superstition. So we kept assigning the room, but we started calling it the bathtub room behind closed doors. The cleaners hated it. They'd go in pairs. Even when nothing moved, the mirror always fogged up on its own. Once, one of the maids, Rosa, swore she saw the words, "Don't leave me," written in the steam. But when she called her co-worker over, it vanished. Guests who stayed more than one night always complained of water sounds, dripping, running, gurgling, sometimes crying. One guy swore his sheets were damp every morning, like someone had gotten into the bed wet. Then came the worst night. 3:08 a.m. We get a call from room 237. The guest was an old man, a solo traveler, very logical, very composed. He said, "Someone knocked on my bathroom door from the inside, not once, 3 times. I sprinted up. When I opened the door, the room was empty, but the lights in the bathroom were flickering. Not just flickering, buzzing, and the bathtub faucet was trickling, just enough to hear. That's when I noticed it. There was water, not just in the tub. It was on the floor, in a straight line, like footprints, leading from the bath to the bed. But no one had walked. No one had opened the door. I put in my resignation a week later. Mark lasted a month more. He said he heard a woman humming in the elevator when he was alone. Hummed the same tune for 3 floors. When the doors opened, no one was there. Room 237 is still open, as far as I know. They just keep painting over the mold and turning the mattress. But something lives there now. Or maybe something was never left. Not every hotel room starts off haunted. Some of them become haunted, and I was there when it happened. Story number 3. I know all of you mean well, but I'm getting really tired of being asked about my ascension. I tried to make it clear to you that it was a painful subject, but that just seemed to goad you into persisting. I understand that spiritual transcendence sounds like a dream come true, that beholding the face of ultimate reality would give you some sort of inner peace, but it wasn't like that at all. So, although this disturbs me more than you can imagine, I'm finally giving in. I've written this to explain once and for all what happened, but after this, no more questions about it, ever, okay? I'm dead serious. It happened while I was associated with the Free Deist Foundation. Don't take that as an endorsement. Please don't flood into their temples or hound their monks, demanding to learn the secrets of the universe. I was merely a loosely affiliated customer when it happened, and I have no idea how much credit they can take. I'm a seeker, and I've belonged to many organizations in my life. I've even pursued my own path, based on what I felt in my heart. Was that the true source of my experience? Even I don't know. but I remember how it started. It was a crisp Saturday morning, and as I had many times before, I found myself in the temple, one of many supplicants in the central hall, sitting upon scented pillows, meditating together. The monks kept censers of incense burning around the altar, acolytes fanning the smoke with palm fronds, sending it wafting over our heads. Some supplicants hummed, some chanted, but many like me preferred to sit in silence. Don't even know what triggered it. I was just sitting there, reaching out to the universe in my mind, trying to contain any desire for particular results. I knew that letting my ego determine my path was a sure road to nowhere, and I strove to keep it in check. Deep down inside, though, I could never help feeling that I demonstrated my superiority and worthiness by choosing to pursue this path, as opposed to the degraded, mundane reality of everyday life, the endless pursuit of pleasure, the mind-numbing pop culture, the lowbrow distractions. I felt they were beneath me. My meditation wasn't just a practice, it was a defiant act, a righteous path to defy the squalor of existence. I admit I may have cultivated a quiet ego about my spiritual worthiness. I'm not saying this to elevate myself or to judge anyone. I'm just putting it out there so that you understand where I was really coming from. As far as I know, I was doing what I always did. There was nothing special about that day, but the first change I noticed was that the ambient noise became quieter, its volume gently and smoothly ramping down, as if it, or I, were somehow far away. I tried my best not to react to it. It seemed to be a good sign that I was finally tuning out the outside world, a positive development in my practice of meditation. Then, without any warning, I felt a shift. Not a gentle awakening, but a jarring, almost violent displacement. The temple, the sounds, the very air dissipated. It wasn't at all what I expected ascension to feel like. I suddenly found myself somewhere else. To my great dismay, it wasn't a brightly lit cloud bank or a liminal space where God gazed upon us beatifically. It was a crowded plaza, the sky a sickly shade of greenish brown. I found myself beset from all sides by a vast, bustling, indifferent crowd. The air here wasn't ethereal, it was stale, a little stuffy, smelling faintly of ozone and old dust. Before me, in the distance, shimmering brilliantly, stood a golden gate. It was exactly as heaven's entrance had been described in countless paintings and innumerable near-death experiences. The crowd slowly shuffled forward, drawn inexorably toward it. There didn't seem to be much choice but to go along with them, so I let the multitude gently sweep me forward. I had plenty of time to look around me. The crowd was a bewildering mix. As expected, there were hunched old people who appeared to have ambled out of their deathbeds, their heads turned to and fro to survey the crowd, many wearing the same blank, uneasy expression. Some were unnaturally thin, little more than walking skeletons. They tended to flop their poorly supported upper body onto whomever was nearby. This earned them indignant glares, but little else. It seemed clear they couldn't help it. Others were morbidly obese, standing on their own for the first time in years. No need for the expected aluminum frame walker with the shoe-like tennis balls impaled on its front legs. The crushing density of the crowd let them move forward on their own, at the slow pace they were accustomed to. Many were weary, middle-aged folks marked by chronic illness. More than anyone else there, they seemed at peace, content to shuffle along with the others. A few of them blinked in the unaccustomed light, although their eyes showed the blank sclera of diabetes-induced blindness. They could apparently see again, but appeared too surprised to enjoy it. One fellow I will never forget. All that was left of his face was a single eyeball. At least, half of his head was missing, the void reaching nearly to the back of his skull, his throat sewn up, save for 2 small holes, possibly for breathing and eating. I'd heard of severe head cancer cases like this, but had never seen one. He appeared none the worse for wear, though, his animated movements telegraphing his joy and relief. Some were agitated young people, clearly having arrived via sudden, violent ends from accidents or risky exploits. They gave themselves away with their horrified expressions and futile pleas for another chance. Finally, they would sink into sullen silence and join the others, only moving when someone pushed them from behind. A few held their severed limbs with their remaining good arm, unsure of what else to do with them. Others struggled to remove wooden beams or steel spikes from their torsos, some garnering help from those nearby, only to be forced to carry their instruments of impalement, there being nowhere else to put them. One held onto her head with both hands, the blood on her shoulders giving away her injury. Occasionally she would hold her head high to get a better look around, but would quickly lower it back onto the bloody stump of her neck, plainly uncomfortable. With this new ability, I couldn't be sure I saw anyone who looked like me. There were a few flowing robes here and there, but I wasn't certain they were seekers. That might have just been their fashion. The thick crowd made it impossible to do much but trudge toward the Golden Gates. I did notice some new arrivals materialized in the middle of the throng, startling their new neighbors. I'm not sure if my arrival was met with any protests. I had been too startled for much in the way of self-awareness. I felt a shove from my left side. A new supplicant had arrived. A slicing pain erupted in my torso. I could feel the cold steel digging into my flesh. I turned a frown at this effrontery, and immediately my words turned to stone in my throat. Standing beside me was some sort of Gothic priestess, her black spiderweb-like robes barely concealing the details of her voluptuous body. Her exposed skin was just as pale as her inadequately obscured flesh. Her wide, haunting eyes, exquisitely decorated with black makeup, were enough to send chills down my spine. But I was immediately distracted by the thrush of metal blades protruding from her hairless head, poking through her shroud. Quickly, I realized the rest of her body was covered with the same sort of blades, though they were folded down, hugging her skin. One had apparently protruded enough to slice a gash in my side. "Devil's delight," she crowed. "By my will and through the power granted by the infinite darkness, I have transcended the misbegotten world and arrived here." Her wild grin punctuated the feverish look in her eyes. I could not find the strength, nor the fortitude, to look away. Her presence alone curdled the air. Her expression softened, and she peered at me with firm dispassion, as a snake might when sizing up its next meal. "I'm Thelema," she declared. "And who might you be?" "I am Julian," I offered meekly. Her face twisted into mockery. "Then I'm Norma, though no one calls me that anymore." She looked me up and down with obvious disapproval. You really go by your birth name? She threw her head back and cackled. It takes all kinds, I guess. She transfixed me with a bewildered gaze. You really did it the hard way? Clean living, aesthetic lifestyle, endless meditation, that sort of thing? Well, yes. She cackled again. Then I have to commend your effort. I never had the patience for any of that. I only worked hard at finding shortcuts. Dreading her response, I asked anyway. So how did you do it? She shrugged. I'm a seeker. A little black magic here, a little witchcraft there. But lately I've been more about ritual magic. Coyly, she swept her eyes over her curvaceous form. Mostly sex magic. You ever try that? No, I retorted. My current path is celibate. Shook her head gently as a deep-throated chortling slowly grew in volume. Oh, you poor deluded fool. Life is for living. The universe offers us many pleasures. It doesn't want us to forego its bounty. It wants us to be happy. She clucked her tongue as she beheld my simple brown robe. You were really living life on hard mode, weren't you? Granted, your soul is less stained than mine. But what does it matter if we end up in the same place? I strained to keep my anger in check. I can't believe someone like you is allowed into heaven. Not only allowed, but welcomed, she gushed, flinging her arms upward, the only place where there was any freedom of movement. You've heard the saying, right? There are many paths, but only one destination. I pinched my eyes closed and tried to ignore my surroundings. I had learned to tune out the real world during meditation, and I tried desperately to do it here. The crushing horde, their varying but uniformly awful smells, and the caterwauling of the recently deceased made it impossible. I opened my eyes to see Thelema still standing next to me, her eyes wide with gleeful insanity. So what was your trigger? I asked. What finally let you ascend? Nothing I haven't done many times before, she replied. Just the latest virgin, male, and the usual profane ritual. She fixed me with an arresting glare. Do you know how difficult it is to find virgins these days? I finally had to resort to unemployable shut-ins. You wouldn't believe how much time I had to spend trawling through anonymous image boards, looking for gullible chumps. I've sent out so many nudes, I sometimes feel like a whore. But it paid off in the end. I could feel this conversation tarnishing my soul, but she continued. So there I was, with my latest patsy, bouncing rhythmically on top of him. He had a really big schlong, this one, and we had one of the biggest simultaneous orgasms I remember having. She cocked her head to one side. Maybe that was it. Most of them come too fast and then try to lie about it. A wicked grin spread across her face. Finally, it was all worth it. Here I am. I stared ahead glumly, lost for a response. What's wrong? She asked. You made it too, didn't you? I can't believe heaven rewards people like you, I growled. You're the opposite of everything I consider to be enlightenment. I told you, she cheered. Life is to be lived. The universe wants you to be happy, not all bottled up inside, denying your nature. There was never any reason to be so hard on yourself. I guess I don't understand the nature of heaven. I finally had to conclude. I noticed the golden gates had grown closer and felt grateful that this ordeal was coming to an end soon. I felt myself shoved brutally from behind, followed by a feral roar. Closing my eyes and cowering, I dreaded whatever came next, surprised to hear it was several female voices bellowing similarly. As that settled down, someone shouted into my ear, "Move aside, peasant." I opened my eyes to see Thelema staring behind me, her eyes wide with wonder, her face filled with delight. I turned around to see a barrel-shaped chest covered in animal skins. I craned my neck upward to perceive the head perched atop those shoulders. His ferocious glare put Thelema's to shame. In a day filled with horrors and depredations, this was more than I could stand. I said, "Move aside. The new Lord of Darkness demands it." His chest swelled another size. Menace seemed to pour from under his barbarian clothing. "I can't," I shot back. "None of us can move." "Oh, you'll move," he snapped. "All of you will." I noticed his hand held the ends of several rusted chains, tracing them back. I was startled to see they were all connected to a coterie of emaciated, shivering women standing behind him. Each wore clothes shred to nearly nothing. Underneath, their skin rippled with welts, bruises, and bloody wounds. The chains attached to spiked collars around their necks, but the spikes were on the inside, digging into their flesh. The looks on their faces bewildered me. They all looked clearly broken and traumatized, but each had an incongruous grin, the happiness of their smile clashing with the fright on their faces and the terror in their eyes. "What in blazes did you do to them?" I challenged, finally finding my voice. "Exactly what I promised," he thundered. They knew the path was filled with torment and pain. They entered this covenant willingly, and I delivered. "Yeah," one of the women shouted, her voice gurgling. "Here we are, in front of heaven." "Leave him alone," shouted another. "He kept his word. Finally, it's all worth it." He leaned toward me. His face was only inches from mine. A foul odor poured from his mouth. Some of it may have come from sour blood, but most of it was indescribable. Gagging involuntarily, I tried to pull back. "And now," he stated simply, "stand aside." He pushed my shoulder. To my surprise, I stumbled to the side. Looking around, I realized that the crowd had somehow parted in front of me. Grinning smugly, he stomped forward, giving the chains a jerk. His women stumbled, then followed him. One fell to the ground. She cried out in pain. He turned around, his eyes furious, and yanked her chain. "On your feet, hag," she shrieked pitifully as she struggled to find her footing. He marched on, oblivious to her pain. "Make way for the new Lord of Darkness," he roared, slipping through the narrow passage that had formed in the multitude. As the crowd cheered him, he and his entourage passed through, the path closing up behind them. "Wow," Thelema exulted. "Can you believe that?" "Not for a moment," I mumbled. So many of my assumptions about the nature of God and the universe crumbled as I pondered them helplessly. The audacity of his path. She gushed. "Torture, blood magic. You have to admire the bravery." "Do I?" I muttered. Thelema peered at me again. This time, it felt like genuine sympathy, which I found unsettling. "Don't take it so hard," she advised. "You made it here as much as he did, after all. There may be many paths, but the destination is the same. I couldn't wrap my mind around what I had just witnessed. The Gnostics taught that God was completely indifferent to our plight, but never had the evidence been cast into such sharp relief. There had to be an answer for all of this, and I hoped it was through those golden gates. If it's all the same to you, I said, turning to Thelema, I'd rather just focus on getting through those gates and finding out what heaven is like. Thelema looked wistful. Suit yourself, she replied, though I was hoping to see you on the other side. I was looking forward to exploring this new territory with you. I frowned as I looked her up and down. I don't think you're my type. And what type would that be? She shot back. Beautiful, willing, spiritually centered. I think we have a lot in common. Maybe someone that didn't look like an unfolded Swiss Army knife. I groused. She sighed, huffily. I thought you were different, she snapped. But you're like all the rest. You can't even see past the surface. I turned away from her angrily, focusing my gaze on the golden gates, which grew ever closer. Soon, I told myself, this ordeal would be over. Something shoved my right side. That was quickly followed by fervent gurgling and repeated rounds of vomiting. After everything else that had happened today, it seemed like the least of my worries. Following a round of violent coughing, my ears were suddenly blasted by a high-pitched caterwauling. I redoubled my efforts to ignore what was going on around. Me, Mommy, the high-pitched voice screeched. I want my mommy. I turned to look. Next to me stood a little girl, her clothes drenched, the braids in her strawberry blonde hair unraveling. She shivered uncontrollably. What happened to you? I asked her, unable to maintain my detachment. The little girl's face turned glum. Mommy said she was going to make everything better, she related. Then she drove off the bridge and into the water. The little girl looked around frantically. Where is she? She could be hurt. I pinched my eyes closed and tried to keep my composure. Everything is better now, honey, I heard Thelema say. You're going to heaven. The little girl sniffed. I opened my eyes to see her stare, unblinking. What about my baby brother? Is he okay? He is already in heaven, dear, Thelema assured. Babies go straight to heaven. A small, relieved smile cracked over the little girl's face. And what about my mommy? Thelema didn't answer. I turned my head and looked down. If your mom deliberately drove you all off a bridge, then she's definitely not going to heaven. The little girl's eyes grew wide with horror. A gurgling cry turned into a sustained scream. Mommy, she wailed. Why did you have to tell her that? Thelema growled. What was I supposed to say? I countered. It's the truth. No, it's your truth, Thelema snarled, and not a very nice one. The little girl continued to bawl. Thelema's indignant glare bored into me like twin jets of fire. Haven't you figured out just how little you understand about the nature of the universe? I started to speak, but my throat choked up on the words. The little girl was now beating on me futilely with her tiny fists, screaming, "No, no, no," over and over. I turned to look at Thelema, but she was staring at the gates of heaven, a sour expression on her face. I exhaled sharply and resumed staring in that direction. Soon, all this would be over. Finally, I passed through the golden gates. From underneath, I realized with a start that they weren't golden at all. They may have shone in the sunlight, but not only were they painted white, but the gloss had worn away over time, leaving dull streaks and patches. The only golden color came from the sunlight and the unearthly shade of the sky. I sighed heavily and continued to shuffle forward. Soon, I noticed ropes suspended on metallic stanchions. I hadn't noticed when those had started. They guided me along a path that finally terminated in a row of simply constructed tables, cheap-looking chairs strewn along their length. I sat in the first empty one I found, meeting the weary glare of the first angel I had ever laid eyes on. Far from filling me with awe, he looked like a cynical civil servant, complete with an ill-fitting, slightly glowing robe. Sweeping my eyes along the tables, I noticed the other angels looked similar. Thelema sat in the chair next to mine, her eyes shooting me an icy, disapproving glare. The angel assigned to me shuffled papers that seemed to be made of pure light, but on closer inspection looked like endless spreadsheets. His simple name tag read, Peter. Wow, I exulted. Are you the Saint Peter of legend? His heavy-lidded eyes glared at me. Of course not, he answered. There are a lot of Peters in heaven, just like where you came from. He peered closely at his papers. Earth. Ugh. My condolences. I heard sniffling to my right. Next to me sat the little girl. Her angel reached across the table to hold her hand. Don't be afraid, young one, she cooed. Your pain is over. Where's my mommy? She simpered. She'll be along soon enough, the angel declared. Until then, you can wait inside with your baby brother. She looked up with a start. He's okay. He's fine, the angel assured her, and he really wants to see you. The little girl looked back, eagerly, a broad smile on her face. The angel took a shining necklace and put it over the little girl's head. In an instant, golden light flowed over her, repairing her torn clothing, healing all her wounds, and grooming her to perfection. The little girl's face beamed with beatific joy. You may enter, the angel explained. Follow the light. You'll know where to go. Without another word, the little girl stood up and walked away, quickly disappearing from sight. I can't find your name here, Peter announced. Were you expected? What do you mean expected? I replied. I've been meditating for years, and finally, I ascended. Peter gave me a disapproving glare. A volunteer, huh? Almost as bad as a suicide. What do you mean? I asked, taken aback. Are you at least part of an organized group? He asked. Not really a member, no, I explained. I pay to meditate in their central hall, but I've never formally joined. They've asked me to, but I kept turning them down. Peter shook his head and pinched the bridge of his nose with his fingers. Then you have a lot of paperwork to fill out for your visa application. Visa? I asked quietly. I looked down to see a thick stack of forms lying on the table in front of me. I wasn't sure how long they had been there. Peter pushed them closer to me. You can take these down to the study hall and fill them out. When you're done, come back. We need to keep this line moving. The dead have to fill out forms to go to heaven? I guffawed incredulously. No, Peter snapped. Only the ascended. If you come here before your time, There's a lot of paperwork involved. Normally churches do that on your behalf. Did you think organized religion exists for no good reason? Jaimum, mouth hung open. I was unable to form a reply. Wow, you really are the worst, I heard Thelema say. She was glaring at me as if she had found me stuck to the bottom of her shoe. You had no idea what you were getting into at all. You belong to an organized group, I scoffed. Of course, she snapped. The necromantic cotillion. You think I stuck all these blades into myself? She swept her hands over her form. This takes teamwork. Wow, you know literally nothing, Peter snarled. Another form appeared on top of my stack. Here's a simplified checklist to help you ease into these forms. I quickly scanned over the checklist. It says here, I have to pick a profession. Well, of course you do, Peter retorted, throwing his hands up in the air. Do you think I volunteered for this exalted task of having to deal with you? Look at me. This could be your future. He leaned over slightly and looked me in the eye. If heaven were better than being alive, people would be committing suicide left and right to get here. Then where would that leave us? I picked up the checklist and looked at it closely, mostly to shield myself from Peter's penetrating glare. I always thought I'd want to be a bodhisattva. Ha ha ha, Thelema interjected. She was now wearing a shiny necklace and bathed in a golden glow. All the metalwork impaled in her skin was gone. With her health restored, she looked more beautiful than ever. Gone was the serpentine look in her eyes. They now radiated pure warmth, pure love. I felt a lump rise in my throat. What happened to all your piercings? I asked. They're gone, obviously, she retorted. It's called penance. Are you telling me you've never heard of prescribing pain for religious purposes? I always felt that was so unnecessary and brutal, I opined. She stood up and started to walk away. Just one more thing you're wrong about. She slapped the back of my head as she passed by, causing my upper body to lurch forward. I can't believe I was ever attracted to you. She quickly blended in with the crowd and vanished. I stared after her hotly for a moment, then turned back. Peter was unsuccessfully trying to stifle his laughter. He lowered his hand and smirked at me. What was that all about? I growled. Didn't you know? Peter asked. Bodhisattva is one of the worst jobs there is. You have to descend back to the lower realms to be a teacher, or messiah, though that usually ends with being burned alive for heresy, or nailed to a cross, or some other awful fate. I resumed reading the checklist. What other sorts of jobs are there? Peter snickered. We won't know until you fill out the forms, but based on what I've seen so far, you're likely to end up on welfare in a high-density housing project. A chill shot down my spine. That sounds like hell. That is hell, Peter revealed. Hell Towers is the largest housing development we have. Block after block of skyscraper apartment buildings, each one more brutalist than the last. A wave of ennui washed over me. My hand fell limply to the table, taking the checklist with it. This isn't at all what I expected. So, Peter shot back. Who died and made you princess? I noticed the two angels sitting near Peter were staring at me and laughing. We're all dealing with this terrible creation in the best way we know how. Peter continued. You don't have all the answers, and neither do we. I closed my eyes as I felt tears well up inside me. In many ways, heaven was worse than the place I left. I think I'd prefer to go back. Peter snorted derisively. Now he gets it. The air suddenly changed around me. My eyes shot open. I was back in the temple, sitting on my cushion. I found myself surrounded by the other acolytes, staring at me expectantly, wide grins on all their faces. "You ascended," one exulted. The crowd cheered loudly. "How did you know?" I asked, as the applause died down. "Because you stopped moving," another revealed, "and you were giving off a golden light the whole time." I averted my eyes. The tears I had been fighting started to flow. "What's wrong?" one asked. "You didn't go to hell, did you?" "I don't know," I answered. "I didn't get that far. I think it was some sort of purgatory." The acolytes exchanged worried looks. "What are you talking about?" "Ascension isn't what you think it is," I revealed. "Don't bother trying. It's just big crowds and a lot of waiting." I got up to leave. They stared after me with puzzled expressions. I turned back once before exiting the central hall. And the forms are incomprehensible. That was the last time I ever stepped foot in the temple, and I don't plan to go back there or any other church. I've been preparing most of my life to reach the other side, and found it more terrifying than I can comprehend. And now, I don't know what to do with myself. Should I party until I'm broke? Should I stick myself with pins and needles? Should I join the military and die heroically? Hermeticism has long declared, "As above, so below." Only now do I realize the full horror behind that statement. I hope this answers everyone's questions about my ascension. Now you know the brutal truth, that it was nothing worth striving for. And hopefully you understand why I'm now dedicated to living the longest life I can, because this world, as awful as it is far better than the alternative. Story number 4. Be quiet, sweet boy. Daddy is really tired, and he doesn't like to be woken up. I nodded and silently continued adding and subtracting fractions on the worksheet in front of me. My pace through the work was brisk, and in just a few minutes, I was finished. My brother took advantage of my pencil's rest to ask me a question. "How do you do multiplication? 9 times 8 takes too long." I glanced over at my father, lying across the couch. He shifted. He mumbled, "Shut the fuck, you two. Go outside." "But I'm not done with my homework yet, Dad," my brother said. Nick never did know when to be quiet. "Get the fuck outside," my father said, his foot lashing out to kick the coffee table. The French onion dip that had been sitting on it burst open on the carpet. "Clean it the fuck up," he screamed. "I can't get a fucking minute to myself in this fucking house," he bellowed, shifting himself from the lying position to a standing one. Apparently, being the manager of an arcade was exhausting work. My brother and I ran for the door, the clatter of the screen door making note of our escape into the summer sun as my father's ire turned towards our mother. I knew she'd clean up the dip, and I knew she'd need new eyeshadow before the day was out. The backyard was inhabited by imaginary fairies and teeming with adventure. The heroes and villains in the backyard were easier to define, and our time there was the highlight of our years at that house. The grapevines crawling across the trellis, the shed where we waged imaginary wars against fictional armies, the garden where Lola was master and commander of all things growing. I walked over to the garden, breathing a bit heavily from the sprint out the door. Lola was hunched over, pulling weeds with a vigor that belied her wizened appearance. She spoke no English, and my Tagalog was very poor. "Lola, can I help?" I said, mimicking the weeding motion she was making. She nodded and smiled. We could still hear the bursts of rage coming from the house. I know she heard it, but she just motioned for my brother and I to start pulling weeds. I pulled, and a dandelion snapped at the soil line. Lola smiled at me and gently took my hands and showed me how to dig deeper and pull the roots of the invasive plant from the earth. She threw her hands up and re-illustrated how to properly weed after I made the same mistake with the next one. Once I'd mastered the technique, she motioned to the green peppers and gave a thumbs up and a smile. I think she was telling me that the weeding made the green peppers happy. In my mind, we were stopping the yellow-crowned orcish invaders from destroying the peaceful green pepper tribe. The memories of Lola all followed the same script. I wish there was some nuance to make this story hit harder, but the truth of it is that she was the kindest and most patient human god ever put on this earth. She taught me to pray, taught me to care for things that can't care for themselves. Like green peppers, her brightly colored headscarf has been a totem throughout my life. Beauty in the face of pain. It wasn't until I was in my 30s that I even knew she had been fighting cancer in those years. I still don't know why her lack of hair never stood out to me then. One night I woke up suddenly. The moon was streaming through the window, washing the room in a relaxed luminescence that felt calming. At the foot of my bed, Lola was standing. She looked at me with her headscarf and wrinkles and serene smile. She held her finger to her lip and mouthed something I could translate this time. She told me that everything would be okay. I found out the next day that she had died the evening prior. She wasn't even at home. She had been at my cousin's brownstone, 30 minutes away. I never told anyone about her visiting me that night. And no matter what life took or gave to me, no matter how far I drifted from spirituality or wonder, I have never once doubted that this beautiful woman, my Lola, had come to say goodbye that night. Story number 5. I awake to the wet, frantic pulsing of my collection of hearts, each trapped in its iron cage. Veins swell, arteries throb, and blood oozes between the bars like living ink. "Good morning, my loves," I whisper. They slam themselves against the cages, screaming without words, leaking devotion and need. Their pulses are frantic, almost unbearable, a symphony of longing and pain. I scowl. I give them scraps, rotting fruit, my leftovers, and expect their worship. The mirror reveals my reflection. Lumps twist and swell across my flesh, grotesque, mountains of uneven meat arising on my chest, abdomen, arms. I stare, disgust coiling inside me, yet force a brittle smile. "I'm handsome," I mutter. "Everyone loves me." A lie spat into the glass. I move to my pantry, where my fruit glows like jewels. Apples, oranges, exotic berries, and long-skinned melons. I bite. Juice floods my mouth, sticky and sweet. Seeds crush between my teeth. I savor the flavor of beauty that is not mine, consuming pieces of the world as if I can hold it inside me forever. The fruit nourishes me, but never enough. I scrounge up the scraps I didn't finish, my crumbs, and return to the cages. I brought you food, my loves, I announce. The hearts shudder violently, blood dripping from mangled veins. They slam themselves against their bars, grinding teeth and pulsing furiously. I pour the rotting fruit into the cages. Maggots writhe in the juice. The smell of decay clings to my fingers, my skin. They feast, tearing through the pulp with teeth and claws, veins quivering, eyes desperate. I watch both disgusted and proud. I am their savior and their tormentor. I dress, layering fabric to hide my lumps, my deformities, armor against their eyes, armor against the world, armor against myself. The city waits outside, a battlefield of desolation. Streets glimmer with neon-like veins, blood-colored and slick with grime. People surge through them, hollow-eyed, lashing out. Loneliness breeds violence here. Fists break flesh, teeth split lips, screams shatter glass, and echo against brick, concrete, steel. Some claw at one another, desperate for acknowledgement, desperate for proof they exist. Some huddle in packs, laughing too loudly, trembling in terror that their connection is nothing but smoke. Others vanish into screens, faces slack, pupils dilated, corpses masquerading as life. And everywhere ghosts shuffle, faces down, terrified of touch, terrified of attention, terrified of themselves. All of it, the fighting, the shouting, the clawing, is born of emptiness. Loneliness spills outward, becomes chaos, becomes war. And I walk among them, untouched, a predator of devotion, yet aching in my chest for someone to crave me as I crave their adoration. And then I see her in a rose garden, a small oasis of color. Amid the gray rot of the city, she crouches among the blooms. Her hair is fire and frost, glimmering, impossibly bright against the decay. Her skin is etched with scars, pale ribbons of past pain. But her glowing healing hand reaches for a rose. She pricks herself. Blood blossoms across her fingers. She winces, recoiling, then reaches again. Thorns pierce her flesh a second, a third time. Her wrists drip crimson, yet she does not stop. I step forward, my heart thrumming, rage and fascination tangling into a single coil. I grab her wrist too hard. Ow, you're hurting yourself. I snap. Anger spikes, volcanic and raw. My chest pounds. Why feel pain when I have given you care? Why falter when I am trying to keep you alive? Her trembling, her sorrow, it rips me in half. Confusion surges into fury. Her eyes meet mine, wide, trembling, full of sorrow. Why won't they accept me? They don't like people like us, I mutter, kneeling, tweezers in hand. I begin to pull thorns from her wrists, her blood slicking my fingers, sticky and warm. My frustration flares. Her neediness, her vulnerability enrages me. How can someone feel this much and still look at me as if I am the answer? I feel it. a spark of empathy, hot and sudden, like acid in my chest, but only because my anger burns too brightly to contain. I work with precision, pulling each thorn, my fingers coated in her blood, the smell of iron thick and sweet. I am careful, reluctant, detached, yet somehow, in the storm of my own rage, I care. She looks at me, wide-eyed, trembling. No one has ever done this for me. She whispers, "You healed me." Confusion fractures into pride, then into a hollow relief that almost shames me. Finally, someone sees me. Someone craves what I give. Even if it is scraps, even if it is only pieces of fruit and thorns pulled from her skin. I reach into my pocket, offering one of my ripest fruits. She hesitates, trembling. Hunger betrays her. She bites. Juice floods, her mouth bright as blood, sweet and sticky. She devours it. I watch and my chest twists, a knot of frustration and longing. "What?" I snap, voice rough and ragged. Rage blooms again. Confusion, her trembling, her vulnerability. It enrages me, and yet pierces me, a blade through my ribs. It's just, no one has ever done anything like that for me. She whispers. Tears streak her cheeks. You fixed my wounds. You fed me. I collapse briefly into pride and hollow relief. Finally, someone sees me. Someone desires what I hoard. I embrace her. Her tears soak into my chest. My own heart pounds in chaotic rhythm, echoing the caged ones at home, the ones I feed scraps to and ignore. I have more fruit at home, I murmur, lowering my voice so the world around us cannot overhear. Would you like to come by? Freezes, as though caught between terror and longing. Then she looks up at me, her lips trembling into something like a smile. I would be honored, she says. We walk together to my home. Her scars glimmer under the streetlights like silver threads stitched across flesh. She walks with quiet resolve, her eyes full of sorrow, but also recognition. She sees me. She shouldn't, but she does. At the door, I stop her. Wait. I must clean up. Her brow furrows, confusion soft in her expression. But I do not explain. I slip inside, leaving her on the doorstep. My house breathes like a rotting lung. The stench hits me immediately. Blood, mold, the damp sweetness of fruit left too long to fester. My ears fill with the frantic hammering of my caged hearts. They pound against iron, raw muscle slamming, veins bursting, blood spraying through cracks. The cages rattle like the bones of starving animals. I grunt in frustration, pressing my palms to my ears. Didn't I just feed you? How much more do you want? The hearts answer with convulsions, arteries split open, spraying the floor. Teeth sprout along their veins, gnashing, desperate for anything I will not give. Their need sickens me. Their devotion sickens me. Their very existence sickens me. Yet I cannot let them go. I cover the cages with a blanket, muffling their screams. Quiet. You'll ruin everything. I return to her, my disgust hidden behind a smile. She waits patiently, as if used to being abandoned, as if loneliness is her constant companion. When I open the door, she gives me a small smile. It pierces me deeper than any thorn. Inside I show her my fruit. Bouquets piled high, gleaming like severed organs polished to perfection. Apples split open, glistening like exposed lungs. Grapes burst like clusters of eyes. Melons bleed when sliced. Beauty, grotesque and shimmering. We feast. Juice runs down our chins, stains our hands, drips down to our elbows. We laugh, though our laughter sounds like coughing up blood. We gorge ourselves until the room reeks of sweetness, sickly, unbearable, intoxicating. For a moment I think I could live like this forever. Feeding her, being seen by her, drowning in this communion of rot and sweetness. Then her gaze lingers, too long, too deep. The sleeve of my shirt slips. A lump juts from my arm, a twisted tumor of flesh, a mountain of grotesque muscle and skin. I snatch the fabric up, face burning with shame. "I know already," she says softly. My breath stops. She reaches, pulls the sleeve down herself, staring at the lump with no fear, no disgust. Her eyes are calm, almost mournful. Then slowly, she bends her head and presses her lips against it, kisses it. Once, twice, again. Each touch burns through me, my skin aflame where her mouth lingers. My chest tightens. No one has ever kissed my deformities. No one has ever touched the parts of me I loathe. My heart, deep within me, begins to thrash, pounding against my ribs like it wants out. She looks up at me, tears clinging to her lashes. "You don't have to hide." My throat closes. For a moment I cannot breathe. And then her hand moves to my chest. Her glowing, healing hand. It presses hard, harder, until it breaks through skin. My flesh splits, ribs crack, bones crunch. She pushes deeper, deeper, until her hand is inside me. Blood gushes hot, my scream choking in my throat. But I don't care. For the first time, I don't care. She touches my heart, rubs it, tender, gentle. It thrashes against her palm like a terrified animal, but she soothes it, whispers to it without words. For the first time in forever, I let someone in. And then, her grip tightens. My ribs creak and snap as she clenches my heart, nails digging into its slick flesh. A scream rips from my throat, guttural and raw, but she only laughs. A sound, too wide, too jagged, splitting the air like broken glass. I thrash, choking on blood, yet my legs buckle beneath me. I am caught, tethered to her hand, buried in my chest. My vision flickers with black stars as I gasp, "Please, don't." Her smile is feral now. Her face stretches, jaw unhinging too far, her teeth like thorns, like shards of bone. "You let me in," she whispers, voice sweet as poison. "Now you can't take it back." With one violent jerk, she yanks my heart from my chest. It comes free in a flood of gore, tearing veins like snapped ropes, ripping arteries that spray the walls in crimson arcs. My body convulses, collapsing to the floor, ribs protruding through torn skin, my chest cavity an open, steaming wound. She holds my heart high, still pulsing, veins dangling like roots ripped from the earth. It beats frantically in her grip, as if it knows it has been stolen. Blood spatters her face, her glowing hand drenched in me. I crawl forward, teeth grinding, fingers clawing at the floorboards. My voice is broken, hoarse. "Wait, please." She steps back, her eyes gleaming with something inhuman. Then slowly, she turns. My heart still thrashes in her fist. The cages rattle. The covered hearts inside sense her, sense the fresh meat she holds. Their pounding grows deafening, like war drums. The blanket slips, revealing their twisted forms. Each cage is slick with blood and bile. Hearts sprout teeth, gnash with hunger. Veins twist into claws that scrape the iron. They shriek without mouths, a chorus of endless craving. No, I croak, dragging myself toward her, smearing blood behind me. Not them, not with them. But it's too late. She presses my heart against the cage, and the imprisoned ones surge, wrapping veins around it like chains. They yank it inside, tearing through the bars to drag it into their grotesque prison. My heart shrieks as their teeth sink in, blood spraying. They devour it, cage rattling, veins thrashing, until it is one of them, another captive in my collection. She turns to me then, lips curling into a smirk. "Now you're mine, forever. You can never leave." My body convulses, blood pouring from my mouth. My vision dims, black encroaching. The last thing I see is her silhouette, standing before the cage, my stolen heart pulsing inside, shackled among the others. And then I collapse. My body leaks its last blood, twitching, until nothing remains but a husk. Darkness swallows me whole. Story number 7. I'm a food delivery guy. Nothing glamorous, just delivering food and collecting cash. But hey, it pays the bills. I usually take the late night shifts because people tend to tip more after midnight. The only problem? Late night runs can get weird. I've had drunks try to hug me out of nowhere, drugged up guys staring at me like they wanted to fight. Or worse. One time, I rang the bell at 2:30 a.m., and a fat guy answered completely naked, just standing there waiting for his order. But nothing ever topped what happened to me last week. It started with an order on my delivery app, Night Crave. Tagline, "For every craving, no matter how late." I never thought that line would haunt me later. The order was simple. 1 pepperoni pizza and a Coke. The tip was huge. I didn't even think twice before accepting. I picked up the food and followed the GPS to an unfamiliar neighborhood on the edge of town. Streetlights were flickering like they hadn't worked properly in years. The air was colder than normal, almost biting. Everything in me told me not to go there, but then my phone buzzed. Another tip added. That was enough for me to keep going. The house looked wrong. 2 stories tall, porch sagging, completely dark. No lights, no glow from inside. I rang the bell. Nothing. Rang again. Still nothing. Finally I knocked and said, "Excuse me, I'm from Night Crave with your order." After 10 minutes of silence, my phone buzzed. A message from the customer. "Leave the food by the door." I thought it was weird, but hey, people are antisocial. I placed the food down and was about to leave when I noticed something. The house wasn't just dark, it was burnt, charred wood, blackened walls, like it had caught fire years ago. My stomach knotted. That's when another message came in. "Wait, I want my food in my hands. Hand it to me." The front door creaked open slightly. Against my better judgment, I picked up the bag and stepped closer. A foul, burnt smell hit me in the face. Hello?" I called. At first, silence. Then, movement in the shadows. A hand slid into view. Thin, pale, fingers bent like broken twigs. Before I could react, the hand shot out and grabbed my wrist. The hand was ice. Fucking cold, I screamed, yanked myself free with every ounce of strength, and stumbled backward off the porch. The door slammed shut behind me, rattling the frame. The Coke can rolled into the shadows. I didn't care. I bolted to my bike and sped off like the devil himself was after me. In my mirror, I saw movement in the yard. Too fast, too unnatural. The figure stopped at the edge of the house, and then it waved. I didn't stop until I was back home. The next morning, I convinced myself it was a nightmare. But the mark on my wrist told me otherwise. It looked burnt, not like fire, but like a handprint seared into my skin. I crashed at my girlfriend's place for a couple of nights, told her what happened. She tried to calm me down, but then she got a message from her friend, a news article. The headline read, "Young woman in her early 20s dies in suspected self-immolation following sexual assault. Alleged attacker unidentified." The photo attached. The same house. Smoke-stained walls, burnt windows. The girl had been a medical student, living alone. A delivery guy had assaulted her. She survived the attack, but not the shame. She doused herself in kerosene and set herself on fire 6 years ago. And here's the thing. Another writer shared a screenshot of his app. That same house, still active, still placing orders. I stopped working late shifts. For 2 weeks I slept with the lights on, double-checking every lock. But curiosity eats at you, doesn't it? One night I opened the app just to check. Right then I got a notification, an active order from that house. I froze, opened it. My screen glitched, then rebooted. When it came back on, the app said, "Your order is on its way." I wasn't even on shift. I hadn't accepted anything, but the trip was assigned to me. And in the reflection of my phone screen, for just a split second, I swear, I saw her, a woman behind me, skin cracked like burnt paper, hair smoldering at the ends, watching me. I panicked, shut my phone off, and ran back to my girlfriend's. For a month, nothing happened, except the app kept reinstalling itself. I'd uninstall it, and the next day it would be back. Then tonight, the notification changed. The order wasn't for pizza and Coke. It said, "One delivery rider, delivery instructions, come inside." And then my phone buzzed again. "Arriving at your doorstep at any moment now." But I never accepted any order. I never got on my bike. So, who's making the delivery? Wait, someone's knocking on my door. Story number 6. I should clarify. I bought my new house about 3 months ago. Nothing too fancy, just what I can afford. To be honest, I consider myself lucky that I was able to get it. I've always had a thing for old houses, so when it came on the market, I jumped at the chance. I didn't really notice the window at first. I think I was just keen to get the sale through and get settled. From the street, it all looks perfectly normal, with the weird window on the second floor, above the porch. I say weird. There's really nothing particularly unusual about it in terms of the outside. But inside the house, no matter how often I walk around the upstairs rooms, it just isn't there. At first, I assumed it was some trick of the architecture. Old English houses can be pretty eccentric, with all sorts of awkward angles, funny doors that open into places you don't expect. In my house hunt, I certainly viewed a fair few odd ones. I suppose I told myself it was a charming quirk. Still, I started making a few notes in the first week, more for planning's sake than anything. The upstairs has 3 bedrooms, 1 main hallway, and a smaller cross hall that connects them. I cross-checked my scribbles against the floor plan from the estate agents. I even measured it all, checking that everything lines up where it should. And it does. Except when I try to account for that window. The measurements, if you can call my pacing around measuring, imply there should be a space roughly the size of a cloakroom that just isn't there. I thought maybe there was some closed-off loft space, but between the rooms, between the walls, there's nowhere for it to go. I still can't get my head around it, but with all the stress of moving, I sort of pushed it out of my mind, at least until the noises started. I first noticed the noises in about my 3rd week in the house. After a late night painting the living room walls, I heard this tapping from upstairs. I was a little spooked, I'll admit, but I figured it was just house-settling noises and chalked my nerves up to poor sleep. I kept telling myself the same thing every night as the noises carried on. It was this tapping, and these drawn out, creaks like wood expanding and contracting, every single night starting at 1 in the morning like clockwork. It always seemed to come from the same place, the right-hand wall of the upstairs hall, just where the missing space should be. I did my best to ignore it, but as the days passed, the noises seemed to get louder, more insistent. They started to wake me up at night, and I could swear they'd gotten less like creaks and taps and more like deliberate knocks. I even started to pick out the sound of glass being knocked, rather than the wall. I started losing sleep so badly that I was debating taking time off work. After nearly 2 weeks of it, it wasn't just the knocking. The whole house started to feel unbalanced, like something just out of sight was really wrong. My interest in the window came back. In the tiny bits of sleep I could get, I swear I was dreaming about it. I called in sick from work one Monday and decided to map every wall again. I counted steps, windows, and doors. When my step counts didn't add up on Tuesday, I tore up the carpets and counted the floorboards. At 2 a.m. on Thursday, still in my pajamas, I decided to answer the knocking with my own. Basically, I swung a claw hammer into the wall. These layers of paper, paint, and plaster crumbled away as I kept hitting the wall, the history of the house that I loved just collecting at my feet. Eventually, it all gave way, and the knocking stopped dead. There was nothing. No hidden window, no secret door, just a brick littered with tiny chip marks from the hammer. Still a bit frantic, I pressed my ear to the wall. Silence. After that, I just ran outside into the rain and squinted at that damned upstairs window under the street light. To anyone looking out, it must have seemed like I'd gone mad, I suppose. I had, really. I think I almost came to my senses until I heard it again. Knocking. The sound of someone knocking on glass. I haven't slept more than an hour in days now. When I close my eyes, I see the missing room, the space the house refuses to give up. In my mind, it's there, perfectly aligned, exactly where the measurements say it should be. I dream of standing inside it, but the dream always ends before I can turn around to see how I got in. The knocking is still there. I've tried to ignore it, to bury my head in pillows, drown it in white noise and podcasts, even leave the house entirely. It just follows me. 1 a.m, without fail. Sometimes faint, like a distant memory tapping on the edge of a dream. Sometimes it's so loud I don't know how the neighbors don't hear it too. Nobody does. No one ever looks at that window either. I've watched them. Delivery drivers, dog walkers, even friends I've tried to lure into noticing. Their eyes slip right past it, like it isn't even there, like I'm the only one who sees it. The last few days, the knocking's been getting louder again, but it's not steady anymore. It's impatient, like frantic fists against glass. And the window. From outside, it's different again. I know it's different. For weeks I thought its curtains were drawn, but yesterday I realized the glass itself is darker. When I tried to stare longer, my eyes started watering so badly that I had to look away. Or maybe I'm just crying. The house isn't balanced anymore. The walls don't feel straight. The floorboards give beneath my feet in places I know should be solid. Sometimes I find myself counting steps and stopping short, because somehow I've taken more than I should have. I can feel it constantly. At the edges of my vision, the house breathes. The rooms are wrong. The hallways spiral in patterns that shouldn't be possible. I swear I opened 6 different doors today before I managed to get out. I know I shouldn't go back, but I think maybe I have to. I think I'm meant to. It's hard to explain, but that window is watching me. Even when I keep the curtains drawn downstairs, even when I sit with every light blazing, I can feel it, somehow angled towards me. Like the whole house has turned itself around so that room that doesn't exist is at its center, and I'm the one in it, just knocking to get out. Story number 8. I should have known something was wrong when Jake stopped singing along. We'd been going to Camp Wildwood for 3 summers straight. Me, Jake, Sarah, and Tommy. There wasn't anything fancy, just a patch of state forest up north where you could pitch a tent for $20 a night. No cell service, no bathroom facilities, just you and the woods for miles in every direction. We loved it. This was supposed to be our last trip before college scattered us across the country. Sarah had gotten into some fancy school in California. Tommy was heading to trade school, and Jake and I were staying local, but figured things would never be quite the same. So we'd planned this final weekend, packed our usual supplies, and driven the 4 hours to our favorite spot beside Crystal Lake. The first night went perfectly. We'd set up camp in our usual clearing, about 50 yards back from the water. Sarah had brought her guitar, like always, and after we'd gotten a good fire going, she started playing the songs we'd been singing together for years. Country Roads, Sweet Caroline, all the classics that sound better when you're slightly off key, and surrounded by friends. That's when I first heard it, just as Sarah finished the chorus of Country Roads. I swear I heard someone else singing the last line from somewhere in the trees behind us. The voice was faint, maybe carried on the wind, but it was definitely there. I looked around at the others, but they were already launching into the next verse, laughing at Tommy's attempt at harmonizing. "Did you guys hear that?" I asked during a break between songs. "Hear what?" Sarah adjusted her grip on the guitar neck. "Someone singing. From the woods." Jake laughed. "Probably just an echo off the lake, man. Sound does weird things out here." Nodded, but I wasn't convinced. The voice had sounded too clear, too deliberate to be an echo. Still, I didn't want to kill the mood, so I let it go. The second night, it happened again. We were sitting around the fire, and Sarah had just finished playing Puff the Magic Dragon, a song that always made us feel like kids again, even though we were all 18. As the last chord faded, I heard it again, a voice from the darkness, singing the final line word for word. This time, Jake heard it too. He sat up straighter, his head tilted toward the trees. "What was that?" he asked. "I told you guys yesterday," I said. "There's someone out there." "It's probably just another campsite," Sarah said, though she sounded less certain than the night before. "Sound carries weird in the forest." We sat in silence for a moment, listening. The usual night sounds surrounded us. Crickets, the distant hoot of an owl, wind rustling through leaves, but no voices, no other campers. Tommy grabbed a flashlight and swept it across the tree line. The beam illuminated nothing but trunks and undergrowth, shadows dancing as the light moved. "Maybe we should check the camp registry when we head out," Jake suggested. "See if there are other people nearby." But I'd already seen the registry when we signed in. We were the only ones registered for this section of the forest. The third night changed everything. Sarah had just started playing House of the Rising Sun, a newer addition to our campfire repertoire that she'd been practicing all summer. She was only halfway through the first verse when the voice joined in. This time, it wasn't singing the words we'd already finished. It was harmonizing with Sarah in real time, note for note, word for word. The voice came from multiple directions now, as if whatever was out there had moved around our camp while singing. Sarah's fingers froze on the strings. The guitar fell silent, but the voice in the woods continued singing for another few seconds. Before it, too, stopped. The silence that followed felt suffocating. "That's not an echo," Tommy whispered. Jake stood up so fast he knocked over his camp chair. "We need to leave, right now." "Don't be ridiculous," Sarah said, but her voice was shaking. "It's probably just what?" Jake's voice cracked. "Just some psycho who's been watching us for 3 days, learning our songs." I wanted to argue, but the fear in Jake's voice matched what I was feeling. This wasn't some innocent camper at a distant site. This was something else, something that had been observing us, studying us. "Let's just pack up in the morning," I said, trying to be the voice of reason. "We'll leave first thing," but as I said it, the voice started up again. This time it wasn't singing, it was talking, repeating our conversation back to us in a voice that sounded almost like mine, but not quite right. "Let's just pack up in the morning." We'll leave first thing." Then it repeated Sarah's words. "It's probably just..." Then Tommy's. "That's not an echo." Each phrase came from a different spot in the darkness, as if multiple people were positioned around our camp, throwing our own words back at us. Jake grabbed the biggest flashlight we had and started walking toward the trees. "Show yourself," he shouted. "What do you want?" I caught his arm. "Don't. Just don't." But it was too late. The voice responded, using Jake's own words. "Show yourself. What do you want?" But this time, it wasn't coming from the woods. It was coming from behind us, from the direction of our tents. We spun around, flashlight beams cutting through the darkness. Nothing. But as we stood there, breathing hard and trying to make sense of what was happening, we heard it again, singing. It was Country Roads, the first song Sarah had played 3 nights ago. But now there were 4 voices singing it, each one slightly different, each one an imperfect copy of one of ours. My voice, Jake's voice, Sarah's voice, Tommy's voice, all singing together from somewhere in the darkness beyond our fire's reach. The harmony was beautiful and terrifying. We didn't sleep that night. We sat back to back, around the dying fire, flashlights in hand, listening to our own voices singing our favorite songs back to us from the woods. Sometimes the singing would stop, and we'd hear our conversations from earlier in the weekend being replayed. Discussions about college, inside jokes, even private moments when we thought no one else was listening. When dawn finally came, we packed our gear in record time. Nobody talked about what had happened. We just wanted to get out of there. It wasn't until we were loading the car that I realized Jake hadn't said a word all morning. He'd helped pack, nodded when we asked him questions, but he hadn't actually spoken since the night before. "You okay, man?" I asked him as we secured the tent to the roof rack. He looked at me, opened his mouth as if to speak, then closed it again. He tried a second time, and when words finally came out, they weren't in his voice. They were in mine. "You okay, man?" he said, using my exact intonation, my exact tone. That was 6 months ago. We never talked about what happened at Camp Wildwood, not once. Sarah and Tommy went off to their schools, and Jake and I started at the local community college. Everything seemed normal, except Jake never speaks in his own voice anymore. At first I thought maybe I was imagining it, but over time, I've realized that every word Jake says is something one of us said during those 3 days in the woods. He speaks using our voices, our inflections, our words, like he's some kind of recording device playing back conversations from that weekend. The others don't seem to notice. When Jake talks, they respond normally, as if nothing's wrong. But I hear it. I hear Sarah's voice coming out of his mouth when he orders coffee. I hear Tommy's laugh when Jake thinks something's funny. I hear my own voice when he's trying to be serious. And sometimes, late at night, when I'm trying to fall asleep, I swear I can hear singing outside my window. 4 voices harmonizing to songs we used to sing around the campfire, getting more perfect each time. I think something came back with us from those woods. Something that's still learning, still copying, still watching. And I'm starting to wonder if Jake is the only one it took. Have you ever noticed yourself saying things you don't remember? Deciding to say, Story number 9. I was 19 when I moved into my first off-campus apartment. It was nothing fancy, just a small one-bedroom in a quiet neighborhood near my college. The building was old, the hallways always smelled faintly of damp carpet, but the rent was cheap, and I felt independent for the first time in my life. One of the first things I noticed was how thin the walls were. I could hear my neighbors arguing, or the old man downstairs coughing at night. What unsettled me most, though, was the apartment directly across from mine. The landlord told me it had been vacant for months, but sometimes, late at night, I would hear noises coming from inside, soft footsteps, or a dragging sound like furniture being moved. I convinced myself it was just the pipes or sounds carrying from another floor. About a week later, I was up late, working on a paper, when I heard knocking in the hallway. I checked the time at 2:43 in the morning. The knocking wasn't on my door. It was on the one across the hall. I slowly looked through the peephole, but no one was there. What froze me was the sight of the door across from me, cracked open when I was certain it had been shut. I tried to brush it off, telling myself maybe the landlord had been in there for some reason, though it didn't explain why it would be in the middle of the night. I left a light on and eventually fell asleep on the couch. The next night, it escalated. Around the same time, I heard noises again. This time, it was coming from inside the empty apartment, scraping, followed by what sounded like a low groan. My phone buzzed with a text message. It was from an unknown number. The message said, "Why are you awake?" I froze. I didn't recognize the number and hadn't shared my contact information with many people at school. Before I could react, another message came through. "I can see your light on." My heart was pounding as I shut the blinds and tried to convince myself it was some prank. But when I looked out the peephole, the hallway was empty. Both doors were shut again. The next day, I casually asked the landlord if someone had moved into the apartment across from me. He shook his head and said it was still empty. I didn't mention the noises or the texts. That night, things got worse. Around 3 in the morning, I woke up to the sound of my front door handle being tested, like someone was slowly turning it back and forth. I sat frozen, gripping a lamp like it was a weapon. The handle stopped moving, and then I heard 3 knocks on the door across the hall. The sound was followed by a dragging noise, as if something heavy was being pulled across the floor. The next morning, I saw a note taped to the door across from me. The handwriting was jagged and uneven. It said, "You shouldn't stay here." From that night on, I couldn't sleep properly. I kept a weapon close by and double-checked every lock before bed. Another night, while working on my laptop, I heard creaking across the hall again. Then came a text from the same unknown number. "You're awake again." Seconds later, another message arrived. "You're looking at the door right now, aren't you?" I forced myself to check the peephole. The hallway was empty. Both doors were shut. But then I heard a low groan, this time clearly from inside the vacant apartment. 3 knocks followed, deliberate and slow. I watched as the door across the hall opened just an inch, then closed again. That was the moment I knew it wasn't my imagination. The following night, I couldn't bring myself to turn off the lights. Around 3 a.m., My door handle rattled again. Silence followed, and then the same 3 knocks came from across the hall. When I looked through the peephole, I saw the vacant apartment's door slowly opening. A faint sound of heavy breathing carried out from the darkness inside. I stumbled back, terrified, and my phone buzzed again. The text read, "Don't look away." I locked myself in the bathroom and stayed there until the sun came up. When I finally gathered the courage to look again, the hallway was empty, but taped to the door across from me was another note. "You shouldn't stay here." I packed my things and moved out that same day. I never told the landlord or my friends exactly why I left. Even now, years later, I sometimes lie awake at night and swear I can still hear it. 3 slow knocks. Story number 10. Let me preface by saying I have always been very honest about what I was. I've never had any shame with what I am, with what my mother was, my grandmother, and a long line of women stretching back to the seeming beginning of time. I am a witch. I've always practiced. I've always had power, and not once have I ever harmed another living being. Not ever, despite what anyone might say. Several years ago, I saw a shirt a young lady was wearing on a rare trip to town. It said, "I am the descendant of the witches you forgot to burn." That shirt made me laugh. I ended up buying one off the internet at the public library. I don't have the internet at home, you see. I have been a self-imposed hermit for decades now. It's for the best. I made a choice, and I have to stick with it. Back in the 70s, when I was still relatively young, something dark came to our town. Even I couldn't ascertain where it had come from. Not even my mother, or my grandmother, or any member of our small coven could understand its origin. Regardless of where it had come from, it had come here. We first became aware of this dark thing when the first child went missing. The little boy turned up later, dead and drained, and emaciated like a dried cicada husk. We were blamed first, because of course we were. If there was anything from rain to snow, to someone with a bad case of acne, everyone in our town pointed a finger at us. Some did it in jest, some in habit, and some in outright and malicious hatred. Edith had been the first to sense the thing. I still remember that evening. We had met for tea. No witchy business at all. It had been a delightful afternoon tea, when the poor lady had clutched her pearls and gasped like she'd seen a mouse. "Are you all right, Edith? Tea too hot?" My mother had asked softly, but I knew she suspected that was not the case. Not with the way her eyes narrowed as she looked at the middle-aged woman. "No. Dear heavens. Something has come to our town." I felt it pass through like a cold wind down my spine. Something wicked. Tears were in her eyes as she spoke. My mother nodded and poured out her tea, reading her tea leaves while the rest of us looked on in anticipation. Her face was grim as she read what the bits of waterlogged tea leaves had to say. "My dear ladies, we have work to do," my mother said, standing, wiping her hands on her apron as she stood. And we got to work. Day and night, each of us uses our particular talents to not only track the thing, but find a way to contain it. Constance read her ancient tomes and texts. Mary tracked the beast to its lair, using her divination skills. My mother and grandmother had their spells and potions, and I helped. My skills were in dreams and their interpretation. I spent many days fast asleep in medicine-induced stupor to glean what I could about this interloper. All I could learn was that it was ancient. Perhaps at one point it was worshipped. It had been summoned by those with less skill to do their bidding. Instead, it had killed its would-be jailers and fled into the world, finding victims and blood where it could. Do you have a name, Gretchen? Without a name to bind it, our prison will not be as effective. My mother asked me, her voice filled with concern and anger, though thankfully, that anger was not directed at me. No, Mother. No name. It has many names, and the dreams have not revealed its true name to me. I said softly, no matter. The magic and bindings will hold, though we ourselves will be bound to it until our deaths. My grandmother explained. Her voice was old and strained after so many weeks of working magic. She seemed as frail as paper and as thin. And what about after our deaths, Elizabeth? What then? Mary asked, her voice sharp and worn thin with patience. Then it shall be free, unless we can learn its true name and banish it from whence it came. My grandmother said with a tiny shrug, a price we must pay to contain it. It's been killing children, and it will not stop until it has gone through every innocent life in the town. Edith said, teary-eyed, we lay our trap. It was easy. I was the willing bait for the thing. I was the youngest, and my mother and grandmother had filled me with potions and tinctures to make me more appetizing to the thing. We lured it to a small cave located on our property. We needed somewhere private where prying eyes would not see us, and more importantly, not disturb the thing once it was captured. It came quickly, on its shadowed feet. It took no effort to hide itself. It was darkness itself. No prey escaped it, once it had its eyes set upon it. By this time, over a dozen children and young women had been killed. More blame was laid at our feet. We were being threatened to our faces. Dead animals were being thrown into our yards, and bricks with threats written on them were tossed through windows. When I felt the thing's presence at my back, it took all the strength I had not to run. Our magic was strong, and unbeknownst to the thing, it was already trapped. I could feel the panic set in when I realized I could not leave the cave. Whispered threats were uttered as it reached for me and found it could not grasp me. It writhed, it screamed and begged, and it promised all manner of worldly goods and powers if it would let us go. We ignored it. We all took turns sealing the small cave with bricks and mortar. No easy task to do in the forest on unsteady ground, but we managed. When the final brick was laid, our powers were tied to its containment, to its life, and hopefully, eventually, death. As long as one of us lived, it would be locked behind its prison of earth and brick. But then we started to die, one by one, as old age claimed us. My grandmother first, followed by my mother. Constance drowned on a trip to Florida. Edith and Mary lived to be in their 90s, but the Grim Reaper comes for everyone in the end. I am the last. I am in my 80s. I have never married or had children, though it was not for lack of trying. The rumors that it had been me and my coven who had killed those innocents all those years ago never went away. They only grew, and no man wanted me. I have been friendless for many years now. I have tried to find out the true name of the thing, but to no avail. I have looked in books. I have scoured the internet and found nothing. I have reached out to other supposed witches and have been met with scammers and liars. I feel so alone. And now I am dying. Over the last few years, the harassment has gotten so much worse. I have not been able to safely leave my home, as when I do, I am followed and stalked. I've been threatened with death, and today it seems like they have made good on their threats. My home is on fire. The flames are creeping along my hallway, and I can see the light from the fire getting brighter. And there is smoke, so much smoke. Outside my window I hear them screaming the same thing people like them have screamed for centuries. Burn the witch, burn the witch. I have fallen to the floor and I'm coughing, and I am afraid. Afraid for myself and the others. There are many innocent people who live in this town now. I can feel the thing stirring now. I can feel its anticipation. Once I die, it will be free, and the bricks have already begun to fall away. As the flames finally reach my door, I feel pity. I have no illusions about the pain and fear this creature will unleash on the people of this town, and they are about to learn a very important lesson, one that will be written in the blood of their children. There is a reason why you shouldn't burn witches. Story number 11. I just got home after spending a week at my cousin's house, and I'm convinced that something is seriously wrong with my aunt. I told my parents about everything, hoping they'd understand how disturbing the whole experience was. They assured me they'd talk to her and figure out what was going on, but now she won't return their calls. It feels like they're not doing anything, and the truth is, the whole thing has left me deeply shaken. It all started when my mom told me I'd be staying with my cousin while she and my dad went on their anniversary trip, something I wasn't exactly thrilled about. For one, they never took me on any of their trips, and for another, I didn't particularly like my cousin. His name was Austin, and he was a very whiny child. One year at my birthday party, he cried because I got the toy he'd always wanted, and to everyone's surprise, my aunt and uncle left the party and came back an hour later with the same exact toy I'd gotten, but for him. Luckily, we were the same age, which barely helped, since our interests couldn't have been further apart. Something I was instantly reminded of the moment I arrived at his house. My uncle greeted us at the door with my cousin, Austin, standing beside him. "Welcome in," he said cheerfully. "Okay, buddy, we'll see you in a week. Have fun," my mom called out as she gave me a quick hug. My dad chimed in with a forced grin. He's been so excited about this. Yeah, right. Austin led me to the guest room where I'd be staying, where I dropped my stuff off. Then he took me to his room. "Well, these are my wrestling toys," he said, motioning proudly to a pile of bulky plastic muscle men action figures. "I'm good," I said flatly, making it clear I'd outgrown that kind of stuff. Trying to change the subject, I asked, "Can we go explore the woods in your backyard?" I remembered how cool their property was. Dense trees, winding trails, and a large creek running through all of it. Austin's face changed. "No, Mom will be home soon," he said with a slight frown. "And?" I asked, raising an eyebrow. "Why does that matter?" He didn't answer right away. Instead, he looked down at the pile of toys, paused, then sat cross-legged on the floor. "She just won't like that," he muttered. For about an hour, we just sat there catching up, and I could tell Austin wanted to tell me something. Soon, my aunt came through the door, loudly welcoming me into their home. The sight of her scared me. She had a lot of makeup on, much lighter than her natural skin tone, and she wore blue and green eyeshadow with bright red lipstick, which wasn't exactly perfect. "Did you guys play with the fighter men?" she said, as she rushed to the ground beside Austin, grabbing one of the toys and stringing him up by his arms. She bounced him up and down, moving toward me. Her face then froze in a goofy grin as she held an uncomfortable pose. I froze, and just as I was about to say something, she did instead. "Dinner?" she barked, as she tossed the toy aside and ran out of the room in a scurry, my uncle hanging his head low as he followed. Dinner was god-awful. It was some sort of mix between blood, soup, and skin gumbo, which I had no problem expressing my disinterest in. My aunt ate as if she would never get another meal again, wearing the blood-colored soup all over her face, mixing with her caked-on makeup. She then let out a laugh I hadn't heard in a while. My Aunt Marie always had a funny and unique laugh. That much I remembered. I asked to be excused, as my stomach had begun to hurt. After offering me something else for dinner, my uncle excused me so I could go lie down. Shortly after going to the guest room, I was already feeling better, but the room was very stuffy, which led me to ask for a fan. Austin brought me his fan from his room and apologized to me. "I'm really sorry, man," he said with a frown. "For what?" I asked, as I plugged the fan in and received immediate relief. "For whatever happens," Austin replied, as he left the guest room. I was perplexed by this statement, but chalked it up to his mom's behavior and prepared to fall asleep. As I drifted off to sleep, lulled by the sound of my cousin's wind tunnel fan, I was suddenly jolted awake by something. At first I couldn't tell what it was. Then I felt a slight pressure on the bed, and I noticed that my eyes couldn't adjust to the darkness. In front of me stretched a pitch-black void, and that's when I realized what had woken me. Someone was lying in bed with me, their breathing perfectly synchronized with mine. Panic set in. I tried to move away, but as I did, hands grabbed mine. The more I struggled, the tighter their grip became, until I managed to kick the intruding figure off the bed. I scrambled to my feet and rushed to turn on the lights, but they wouldn't work. With my back to the door, I crept toward it, desperate to escape. As soon as I turned the knob, rapid footsteps slapped across the room toward me. I flinched and fell to the side just as a black mass shot past, slamming the door behind it. Then I heard it laughing, its voice growing fainter as it moved down the hall. And that's when a chilling thought struck me. Was that Aunt Marie's laugh? You've reached the end, but the shadows haven't left you. If this story unsettled you, prove you survived. Like this video, subscribe to Spectral Shadows, and leave a comment with the part that haunted you most. The darkness is always waiting, and so are we. Until next time, don't turn off the lights.